Controversial opinions seem to be a staple of the online mock draft community, and none could be more controversial than the content creators, my guys. And I usually do my mock drafts with AI for what I think is realistically going to happen, based upon reports, based upon what I see a lot of people in the community doing, sort of the consensus sort of thing, even though I might not necessarily agree with the rankings that some people have. They seem to be sort of on the up and up. But then I got thinking like, hey, I'm smart. I know football stuff. Ask Panther fans. I've been calling your deficiencies for years, and I just can't help myself but to get that point in every single time I can possibly. And that's what I'm going to do with this video. I'm going to do the My Guys mock draft, where I'm going to use solely my rankings, whether it be positional rankings or big board rankings. And I think you guys will see that play out throughout the video, because I'm going to address the elephants in the room of what a My Guy mock draft will look like, what I would do based upon my rankings for each and every one of the NFL teams. Not going to do any trades, which kind of makes things complicated a bit in terms of who goes where, but I think you guys will enjoy it. Make sure to leave a like and a comment. Helps out with the algorithms, push this video out to more people. Subscribe if you haven't already. And let's get to the mock draft, because it gets spicy immediately. Start with JJ McCarthy there at 2. I've been saying it for a while. I really feel like the mental aspect of the game and how he was brought up in college with Jim Harbaugh is going to be so significant for him when he gets into these interviews, when he starts to do like, what's your favorite play and why, and all these kind of things. I think he's going to really blow people away with that. And you've already been hearing reports of that from the Combine, of him blowing people away with how he's got it between the ears. And I think that his skill set, this is another thing that people get hung up on. That's a mistake when it comes to the college game a lot, is they get hung up on like high amounts of production. They get in, and when you get tied up in that, you really do miss out on potentially really great players. So, when you get J.J. McCarthy, yeah, they ran the ball a lot at Michigan, but it wasn't because J.J. McCarthy wasn't a good quarterback. It was because just the way that Jim Harbaugh was designing his offense based around the players that he had. You have Blake Corum, Donovan Edwards. You're going to be running the ball a lot. When you get the type of defense that they had, they wanted to shorten up games and force teams to throw the ball and really unleash, guys like over the years, you can list them, all the great edge rushers they've had, all the great interior players that they've had. So I really think that J.J. McCarthy is going to really link up well with Cliff Kingsbury in particular. And I think that this is, by my opinion, this is what I would do in that situation. And then Bo Nix, my quarterback 3, going to Atlanta. And for me, the big thing about Bo Nix is his adaptability. He played at Auburn and he played at Oregon. At Auburn, he was looking like he was going to be a great quarterback prospect, playing a certain way. Transfers to Oregon, changes the offense completely, changes his playing style completely. And I think that he really showed that he's a really well-rounded quarterback in almost every aspect of the game. I think he's somebody who is suffering, I think, from something called prospect fatigue, where he's been in the forefront for so long that I think his game has really been picked apart a lot. And I bring that back to Justin Herbert, who I think fell into the same category when he was drafted by the Chargers as quarterback 3 in that draft. He was in the limelight for so long. They were talking about him coming out the year before, and he went back to school in the Kyler Murray draft. And I think it just gave people too much time to really nitpick at his game, and I think it brought him down a lot. And then other guys, of course, like Joe Burrow had this big year. Not saying he's better than Joe Burrow, but it did hurt his draft stock, even though he went 6th overall. With that prospect, I think Bo Nix is going to be the same type of player. Ironically, they both went to Oregon. Speaking of the Chargers, Quinion Mitchell going 5th overall. I think that this guy is just incredible. I think he's going to really bring a great aspect to the Chargers defense, solidify that secondary that's sort of had talent on paper, but has always kind of been suspect. J.C. Jackson never worked out. But having Quinion Mitchell opposite of Asante Samuel Jr. with, hopefully they bring back Gilman. You got Derwin James out there as well. That's a good for at least your base defense, and you can mix in other guys as well that you have. I really like that. And then Talisi Fuaga being my first tackle off the board. He looked so great at the combine. And his ability early on in the run game, I think, is going to be a great asset. He's not the best pass protector that's available, but he's also not even that bad at it, really. Maybe, you can't take a step back from what you've already had. And I think that he makes you at least a better running team for whoever is going to be the running back on that team. Maybe you can start him, at right tackle. You had Pierre Skoronski you took last year. It looks like he's going to be a guard just because of short arms. But, man, Fuaga just looks so good at the combine, man. He looked the best, I think, out of everyone. And I think that also what is going to help him is that he looked way more comfortable in that right tackle stance than Joe Alt did. Joe Alt looked so uncomfortable when they lined him up in that right tackle stance that it was glaring. So I think that the versatility of Fuaga, I think his upside's really great as well. I just really like the way he looked. I think that it would be he's my tackle one, to be honest. It's close, but he definitely is. So let's talk about it. Drake May for me is quarterback 4. I don't know, man. I don't know. People are like, oh, he's quarterback 2, easy. I don't know if it's that easy. It's really not. I think that the Broncos, may have to trade up to get this, but maybe trade up to 9 with the Bears once they see May go off the board or something. But I don't know, man. I don't know. I think that my quarterback 4 and quarterback 5 and quarterback 6 have such tremendous bust potential. It's absolutely crazy. And there's really not a whole lot of other picks here. Joe Alt goes to 13 just because I have the Jets going Brock Bowers. I think the Jets will solve their problems on the offensive line and free agency. They don't have time to wait for a rookie, even if the rookie does have a pretty high floor. They're in a sprint right now. They're not necessarily playing the long game. I think they'll worry about that once Rodgers is gone. That's when the rebuild will start for the Jets. They're just trying to win a Super Bowl now, so get a top-level weapon. I don't think there's anything really here that stands out as being sort of like that, quote, elephant in the room like we've been talking about here. Maybe it's the Vikings passing on a quarterback at this point. I think maybe Kirk Cousins goes back. Everyone's talking about what's the best fit for Kirk Cousins. Minnesota's the best fit for Kirk Cousins. Let's be honest. Minnesota's the best fit for Kirk Cousins. Troy Fautanu coming off the board there in the top 16. I think he can come in. He could actually really maybe even get higher than this. Just because, again, he looked so great at that combine. He looked like so fluid, lined up in both stances. The pulling drills, he looked great. It's just, I think Seattle's going to run this pickup. If I was Seattle's GM, I'm running this pickup the second Fautanu's available. The second I go on the clock and the Colts don't take him, he's mine, period. So now we're getting into some interesting territory here. I think Byron Murphy dropping this much, this is his definite floor for me. I really like him there. His teammate at Texas, Tavondre Sweat, great work at the combine. Ran the equivalent to a 4.28 or something for somebody who was like Xavier. If he was the size of Xavier Worthy, his 40 time and his get off, to scale it would have 4.28, which is just absolutely ridiculous. So I think he comes in, he solves a lot of problems for the Houston Texans. I would definitely take him over Johnny Newton, who Johnny Newton isn't great in the run, and that's what they really need up the middle. That's where they really struggled for Houston, was up the middle there in the run game. So I think you kill two birds with one stone here. You get a great 3-down guy who can play edge, who can play nose, who can play 1-tech, who can play 3-tech. I think you got great versatility there. Adonai Mitchell. This is the one that really stands out. This is one that I haven't really done up until this point. I do like going wide receiver for Pittsburgh, but going Adonai Mitchell, I talked about it with JJ McCarthy. People get hung up on production. Adonai Mitchell was in a great offense with a lot of weapons out there, with a lot of great players, with a lot of great running backs. You got to look at the traits that he brings, and it's like, oh, he didn't look fast on the field. He looked fast as hell at the combine. And then you look at what his strategy is and how he doesn't run routes at full speed. He sort of sets guys up, so then it's sort of a deception thing where, it makes the DB maybe gear down a little bit. And then he just can take off. And I think you're going to see a lot of that at the next level. And I think that him coming in to Pittsburgh is something that Pittsburgh really needs. I was talking about trading Deontay Johnson long before it became an official report out of the Pittsburgh camp. I think that that's something that's definitely going to be happening as we get closer to the draft. I think as free agency sort of plays itself out and we see where those wide receivers end up, I think once we see, extensions for T. Higgins, extensions for guys like a Gabe Davis or something like that, that's when we're going to start to see that Deontay Johnson trade stuff really, I think, heat up on the teams that miss out on him that are maybe willing to part with a second or third round pick. You look at his production, you're just like, what are we getting at? And here's another thing. We're going to go to the next slide. And I know some of you guys are sitting here going like, where is he? Where is he? Let's talk about it. I got Jaden Daniels falling to number 26. And frankly, I'd have him fall even further than that. For me, he's got bust written all over him. To me, he's Justin Fields. He really is. And Justin Fields has not been a good professional quarterback. At best, Justin Fields has been below average. And I don't get it. I don't see it. I know he won the Heisman. I get it. The arm talent's not great. The running ability is heavily relied on. And I think at this next level, you put him in any of those broken down situations, whether it be Washington, New England, it's just not going to work. It's really not going to work. I have Tampa taking him because I just think that it's at a point now where you look at this board and Tampa's, if they've brought back Baker Mayfield, I think they've brought him back on more of like a 3-year deal. Maybe like a deal that we saw Geno Smith get or Daniel Jones get, where there's an out after, there's a sort of an out after the first year, and then the real outs after the second year. So I think if Tampa's sitting there going like, if this guy's a fluke, if he's like that 1-year wonder, we need some type of contingency plan. We just extended Mike Evans, so there's that. Maybe this works out. Maybe if he sits a while, he can learn a bit. Unlike what Justin Fields got the opportunity to do, didn't really get that chance in Chicago. Kind of got thrown to the wolves quicker than he wanted to, or than you would have liked him to. So I think that there's just, I don't know. I think he's a bust. I think him and Drake May are going to be disappointing. You can come back to me later and tell me how stupid I was. If they're not, I'll accept it. Liatu Latu is another guy that dropped for me. I just think the value of a lot of those offensive linemen are going to supersede him. In the sense that the teams that have a need in that middle of the first round also have needs on the offensive line. And I just think the offensive linemen in that range are so much better. It's no knock on Liatu Latu. I just think it was a bad year for him, unfortunately, to come out. Not like it's his fault by any means. How do you know that you're going to have these beasts on the offensive line and the teams that would happen to have drafted you, like maybe New Orleans, Seattle, teams like that, the offensive linemen are going to be sitting there, and I think it's a much bigger need for those teams, and the player, I think, is much better in the end of the day too. So the Cardinals get a hell of a break here. I think that they'd be extremely happy with this working out this way. I would even dare to say that if, as they see him sort of drop, I would dare to say them, maybe calling up, a team like Miami maybe and being like, hey, maybe we can trade up. And I think Miami could still get Jackson Powers-Johnson or get, an interior guy. Maybe the Cowboys take him instead and then they get Graham Barton. I think that's still a big positive for the Dolphins. I think they'd be willing to do that. And then let's talk about the receivers. They are the ones that seem to stand out here. No Brian Thomas Jr., no Keon Coleman in the first round for me. Not because I don't like him. I think that the wide receiver class is so incredibly stacked that I think teams might be more willing to wait, especially in the middle of the first round, early in the 20s. But then you get a team like Detroit who's looking at a guy like Ladd McConkey, and it's like, man, he gets open so quickly, and he's somebody so great in those short to intermediate routes. That's really going to open things up for Jameson Williams. That's really going to open things up for Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's sort of like your do-it-all. It just makes too much sense for me for them to get a guy like Ladd McConkey in on this roster and help out this offense immediately. I do think wide receiver is a need for them anyway. Jameson Williams hasn't really worked out. He's flashed a lot, but, he is on this team your quintessential wide receiver too. He's sort of just, straight line speed. Amon-Ra St. Brown's your do-it-all, short, intermediate, deep route runner. And then Ladd McConkey's that guy who's just going to, quick slants, whip routes, quick tunnel screens and all that. I think he'd bring a completely different dynamic to this offense, and it would really round out the offense in a way that I think would make them a Super Bowl offense, something that they were just short of, I feel, this past season. And then there's Xavier Worthy, who just blew people away with his speed, fastest player in the history of the NFL at the NFL Combine. And Baltimore looking at him and going, this is a guy who would be really great for the offense as well. He's somebody who, as teams are worried about Zay Flowers, Zay Flowers sort of opens things up for a guy like Xavier Worthy the same way that Ladd McConkey would open things up for Jameson Williams. It's a really interesting dynamic that can be created for the Baltimore Ravens to get a guy like Worthy who's just a straight up burner and a great weapon, somebody who you can throw a screen pass to, and if he gets in space, it's all over. It's all over. He's gonna burn everyone down the field. It's just a great opportunity for this offense to add another dynamic in there. The big outside Rashad Bateman wide receiver types, it doesn't really suit this offense. You got Mark Andrews. You want to keep everything within the numbers. And then for Lamar Jackson, you don't want to make things too complicated. You don't want to have too many difficult throws for him because, frankly, his arm talent isn't the upside for Lamar Jackson. I talked about it with Jaden Daniels. It's not his upside. I think he proved it in the playoffs when they tried to make him a pocket passing quarterback who had to process the defense, who had to then make difficult throws and rely on arm talent. He completely faltered. He looked like as below average of a quarterback as possible when they tried to play that strategy for whatever reason they thought up at that moment. I think Xavier Worthy suits more the weaponry that would better suit this offense. The RPO game would be really huge with him out there. I just think it would be such a great idea. And I'd say Johnny Newton falling all the way to 32 is an absolute gift for the Kansas City Chiefs. I think they would love to just grab him. I think his deficiencies in the run game are going to really hurt him because Byron Murphy, I'd say, is an equivalent to him in the passing game, and he's a better run defender. And then I would say T'Vondre Sweat is such a significantly better run defender due to his size and his being a gap eater that I think a team like Houston would value him over Johnny Newton just based upon what their weaknesses were this past offseason, something that they would try to fix in this draft. So they get a huge gift here where, as of right now, Chris Jones is not re-signed. There's a lot of rumors out there that he's going to work out a deal and he will be back. But if he isn't, then I think Johnny Newton goes and plays the role that Chris Jones was playing in that defense. If Chris Jones comes back, I think Chris Jones becomes a bigger part of the defense, which is hard to believe. But I think he would sort of take on the role of more of a early down nose tackle, early down interior guy, and then Johnny Newton might even play some defensive end on those early downs the way that Spagnuolo liked to do with Chris Jones. I think it provides a lot of versatility there, and I think then on passing downs, you have both of them there up the interior, and you got a great 1-2 punch up the interior. I think Kansas City would really love that. They haven't really ever had a great complement, even a number 2 guy, even a great backup for Chris Jones. So I think that this sort of feeds all the mouths there that they really need on that defense that was so leaps and bounds above, I think, a lot of people's expectations. So there you have it, the ultimate My Guy mock draft. What do you think was my most controversial pick? I bet you think it was J.J. McCarthy. I love him, and you're going to love him too. Trust me, just give it a couple years. Just give it a couple years. I hate that I gave him to Washington because I'm a Giants fan, but just give it some time. Just give it some time. Let it marinate. J.J. McCarthy is definitely quarterback 2. He could end up being the best quarterback in this entire class in terms of career production by the end of this entire, career arc. But, leave in the comment section below your favorite pick, your least favorite pick, who's the ultimate your guy, and I will see you guys with the next video next time.